in 1942, the Carrier Task Force, as they called it, consisted of 1 or 2 aircraft carriers, 2 to 3 cruisers, 5 or 6 destroyers, and an oiler, sometimes 2.
And now we've already gone over what the oiler's job is.
Oiler's good for
the cruisers and the destroyers, though. Their main purpose is kind of to protect the carriers against an airborne threat, right? So if they encounter an enemy aircraft carrier, their job is to provide anti-aircraft fire for that carrier.
Yes, anti-submarine as well.
And yes, that's also very important.
Yes, because that's also a new, not new, but
new word,
evolving threat.
Yeah,
at the time. Now, aboard, let's look at one task force. So aboard an aircraft carrier, you're going to have 4 squadrons, and the squadron consists. There's a fighter squadron, the bomber squadron, the scouts, and the torpedoes. So each one of them has a particular job. And so the fighters, they'll clear the skies. They'll go after other aircraft in the sky. The bombers, they're your dive bombers. So they're carrying massive payloads, and they're diving upon ships from 20,000 feet down to 1,500 feet.
Which is crazy. And they do it at a 70-degree angle. So you're talking, you're losing a lot of altitude.
Pick up speed.
They're using the trajectory of their aircraft to kind of guide that bomb onto the target, right? I mean, you have aiming capabilities, but in this climate and at this time, coming from that high of an altitude to such a low altitude, a lot of the times they're bombing like what they would, like their viewfinder for their bombing, like their targeting system would fog up. Yeah. Right. So a lot of the times you're just kind of using your airplane as, all right, I think this is where it goes, And
eyeball that.
Kentucky windage, as we would call it in the Marine Corps.
Right, yep, Kentucky windage. And now the scout planes, they kind of play a dual role. Now, let me go back real quick to the fighters. You're going to have the Grumman Wildcat as the fighters. And now the Dauntless, SPD Dauntless dive bomber is what you'll find as either the bomber squadron or the scout squadron. And they're going to have a pilot and a gunner, and they're going to have 2 1,000-pound bombs. They got 2 50 caliber machine guns, 2 30 caliber machine guns. So they're equipped for this dive bombing, and very quick, very swift planes. Now, the torpedo bombers, like we said, the torpedoes at this time in our American fleet were not very effective. These are larger planes. These are the Douglas TBD Devastators. And that's going to have 1 pilot, a bombardier, along with a radio man / gunner there, rear gunner. Now, these torpedo bombers are a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier. They operate more at like a lower level altitude. So you're going to have with that either their aerial torpedoes weighed 1,935 pounds.
Yikes!
It's a big, hefty torpedo. They can also, or they can substitute that for 1,000-pound bomb, or 3 500-pound bombs, or 12 100-pound bombs, depending on their mission. And they also, with the rear gunner, they have a 30 caliber rear machine gun at the top of that. So,
and this gets us into an interesting area. So, at this point in the war, the Japanese do have one leg up on us. They've been in conflict for a while before this. They've been at war for a while before this, and the one thing they have more dialed in than we do at the time is coordinating those various squadrons into an attack, right?
Yes.
Because the idea is, like you were saying, the fighters protect the rest of the squadrons from an aerial threat. The dive bombers are to dive. The torpedoes are come in at a low level, like 150 feet off the deck, right? Like low. And then when they get about 2,000 meters or 2,000 yards, I can't remember one of the, it's fairly close when you're considering what is going into this. They would drop their torpedoes and peel off. Yep. Now, in a perfect world, you would have the dive bombers coming in, and simultaneously you would have torpedo bombers coming from the flanks of the ship from both sides. They call that an anvil attack, right? And the reason they do that is in theory, a Japanese ship can actually outrun a torpedo if it's able to turn and go full steam ahead. But if you're hitting it from both sides, whichever way it turns, it's out of luck, right?
Yeah.
And then it also plays into the threat. For instance, torpedo bombing, the best thing for the ship to do is to go fast. so it can escape the torpedoes. But for a dive bomber, the best thing for the ship to be able to do is to go slow, to give your anti-aircraft gunners on board your ship enough time and a steadier target to hit, right? If you're going super fast, it's I would imagine it's like being in a Humvee, and if you're going fast, it's way harder to keep that machine gun on target versus slow.
Yeah.
So it's kind of what's the best case scenario out of two worst case scenarios, right? And if you put that much pressure on one ship, there's almost nothing they can do to avoid being hit.
Yeah.
That's in a perfect world. The U.S. is not good at coordinating that yet. But the one thing they will do is learn how to do that very quickly.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is the most important part of any.
It is, especially considering that our ability to replenish our fighter pilots and our lost fighters and lost ships is so much greater than what the Japanese can do. If the it's, you know what it's like? If you look at the American Civil War, it was way worse if the Confederacy lost troops, because it was that much harder for them to replace them. Whereas if the North lost troops, they still had so many more people they could take and pull into service, right? It's because of that industrial strength. Same thing with their weaponry. They just had that industrial might. That's the same thing you're looking at when you consider America versus Japan in this era. The Japanese don't have that capability. If they lose something, it's going to hurt them much worse than it does us.
The only difference is they actually have the trained pilots right now in action with experience, combat experience. Our guys, not so much.
Brand new.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this clip from America Fog of War, catch the rest of the episode here.